We are here to talk about the legacy of the former First Lady Rosalynn Carter, who died at 96 earlier this week. I'm here with David Greenberg, who is a professor of history, journalism, and media studies at Rutgers University. David, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So it strikes me when we reflect back on the First Lady's life, former First Lady's life, what a pioneer she was in that role. Am I right about that?
Well, in certain ways, I think so. In general, that role, there's no constitutional role for the First Lady. So, in a way, it's really what different women have made of the role. Eleanor Roosevelt, I think everybody knows, was really the first one to turn it into a substantive policy position, becoming really a public spokeswoman on all kinds of issues. But there were women before her who were influential upon their husbands and who may even have had a thing or two to say about policy. And so I think Rosalynn is sort of in the pre Eleanor role in most ways. But one important thing I think where maybe the pioneer word does apply is in creating sort of the formal apparatus of the First Lady, what they call the East Wing. Before that, there wasn't, the same chief of staff, press secretary, the same huge staff. Now, some people would say, well, that's not feminism, that's just administrative bloat. And, we have seen a huge growth in general in White House personnel. That is not in any cabinet office, any agency, but the White House itself. Obviously, they literally don't all fit into the White House. But Rosalynn Carter was significant in that she really established that office of the First Lady as an office unto itself.
What about the fact that she allegedly joined cabinet meetings? And I probably shouldn't even use the word allegedly, but of course, we were not there. But was that unusual?
Yes, it was. And she did sit in on cabinet meetings. I think, if I'm not mistaken, also sometimes National Security Council meetings. And this raised eyebrows, drew some criticism. She wasn't really a participant in any way from all accounts. She mostly kind of sat and observed, but it gave her the information and the knowledge to then, in conversation, of course, with her husband, to be informed about what his advisors were telling him and her own opinions. Now, the cabinet meetings by this point were already sort of on the decline, and we really don't hear about cabinet meetings much anymore. It's been a long-term decline in favor of, again, the White House staff, whether it's National Security Council on Foreign Policy or Domestic Policy Council. But nonetheless, she let it be known that she was going to be an influence on her husband and not stand on the sidelines.
Well, I think obviously one would assume that most partners of a president would be close advisors. I think what's interesting is when even the statement that the former president released regarding her being an equal partner in every way, is that something that has been welcomed in a First Lady, this idea that in essence you're getting two for the price of one?
Right, and that line, of course, with Bill Clinton's when he was campaigning in 1991 and 1992. The fact that it doesn't surprise us today that a First Lady would have an interest in policy, would talk to her husband, be an influence on policy. The fact that that doesn't surprise us is itself a historical development. 50 or 75 years ago, it probably would have been assumed that the wife stayed out of it altogether. And people
as was true in many other professions. Sorry, forgive me.
Right, exactly. No, that's exactly right. It was about a general attitude toward the role of women in society, and let alone that women hold these positions themselves, right? But, women, whether it was Florence Harding or Grace Coolidge or, even Bess Truman, they were intelligent, accomplished women in their own right who often had an influence. Um, more publicly acknowledged, and women, whether it's Rosalynn, or I think, especially Hillary is the next one after Eleanor, who I think becomes kind of a major figure in that office. Uh, but yes, of course, it draws a backlash, it draws criticism. There are people who say this is not a constitutional or a legal role, so it's akin to nepotism. There are others where it's just a more traditional anti-feminist, opposition to women exerting that kind of influence. So I think, it took a lot to stand up and say, yes, this role, the public element of the First Lady's role, is being redefined. And that itself was significant.